Do you feel like something is off with the economy? Because six figures doesn't go as far as I thought it would, especially when I became an adult. Back in the 90s, or especially in the early 2000s, you hit six figures, you had it made. By the time I hit six figures, that no longer was enough. So what exactly is happening here and why? We have an answer. It is called the K-shaped economy. What does it mean? And more importantly, how can we beat it so that you can break past this and build financial momentum for yourself and for your family? Let's go ahead and break it down. Let's start off with the definition of what the K-shaped economy is like. I mean, it's shaped like a K. That's pretty much it. But you have one side of the shape. I feel like I'm on an episode of Sesame Street, okay? You have one side of the graph where things are fine. These are people who are holding assets, houses, the stock market, business owners for the most part. They're doing fine because the Dow, I've said this before, the Dow is at 50,000, right? If you are owning stocks, if you own assets like a home, businesses, things of that nature, you are likely on the upper part of the K. If you don't, you are on the downside. You aren't feeling great. You feel the worst parts of the economy, and the split between those two have gotten much wider. So now we know exactly what a K-shaped economy is. Why do so many people feel like they're stuck in the mud? Well, one part of it is you need someone to help you to create confidence, clarity, and momentum. And I'm the type of financial planner that can help you do that in this type of economy. If you need someone to help you create a financial plan, I am the person for you. You can go to buildingready.com/callkev. Now, there are several reasons as to why people are stuck in neutral, and I would argue you could clump them under one thing, and that is the entire economy, I would say, right after the Great Recession, has consistently been moving up market first, starting with homes. When I say moving up market, I mean things have been, I don't have a better term for this, been luxurized. I don't have, I guess I don't have a better term for it. But for example, there used to be a thing called starter homes. They don't build them as much anymore. We have data on this. We don't build starter homes like we used to. Back in the day, you would get a small starter home for relatively cheap. You buy that, you grow out of that starter home, you get a medium-sized home, and eventually get your dream home. Now, we pretty much only have luxury homes. That is why the median home is well above, well, not well above, but that's why the median home is just above $400,000. That's why first-time homeowners are the oldest ever, because we don't have starter homes anymore. There used to be a point where the first-time home buyer was in their 20s. There used to be a time. Like, it's crazy to think of, like, hey, you would graduate college, and at 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, you would get a house. What? People are well into their 30s, getting closer to their 40s, getting their first house. It is primarily because houses are so expensive, because we do not have that, hey, here is your very first tiny house. For example, when people bought cars back in the day, and I say that because now high schoolers are or have the option for Uber, so you don't necessarily have to get your first car at 16 or 17 like that anymore, but you would get a Hoopty. You would get whatever car that was cheap insurance, and because you usually have a minor accident, no one wants to get hurt, right? But you're not going to get a luxury car as a kid. You would get a tiny thing your parents could probably pay off with cash, usually, right? At least that's what we did, right? They didn't care. As long as it had brakes and it was fine, you weren't trying to impress somebody in high school with your car, right? That is what you started out with, and as you got your first job and stuff, you could start to upgrade at that point in time. I'm not putting you in a super nice car in high school. You were the worst driver you're ever going to be until you're 80, right? That is how it's supposed to start, or it was. That's what you would do with a house until we stopped doing that. And because of that, instead of getting your house at 25, 26, 27, that time between that age until you're 35, 36, 37, that gap is why you feel stuck. That's just one reason as to why you feel stuck. So now that delay in buying a home makes you feel stuck in the mud. You're looking around, comparing yourself to where your parents were at that age. That is why you feel stuck and feel behind. Other industries are pricing themselves up market. I mean, we've talked about this before as well, and I brought this up when this happened. Southwest is moving up market where they are ditching their old model and saying, all right, we're going to do seating assignments. And this is small, but it's true. We're going to go up market. We're going to start adding a first class at some point. Everybody's doing lounges. Everybody's moving and making everything premiumized. I think that is probably a better term than the one I made up earlier in the video. But you guys get the point. But everybody is making things more expensive, trying to cater to that top 10%. And the 10% number is extremely important. And that's because the top 10% of income earners make up 50% of U.S. spending. I'm going to repeat that. The top 10% of U.S. income earners make up half of the spending in the entire U.S. economy. Last I checked, consumer spending makes up 2/3 of our entire economy. And to give you even more context, when I was born back in 1989, that number was just 37%. This is not normal. And because of the way companies work, you can see that, hey, if these people are spending more money, this top 10%, and I'm a company trying to capture more market share and get as much money as possible, where am I going to go? I'm going to move up market. If I start to see that, hey, this top 10% is spending more money, y'all are making up half of the spending, I'm not going to build small homes. I'm going to build luxury homes. If I'm Southwest, I'm not going to make flights more affordable. I'm going to move up market. I'm going to go towards business customers. Look at the Super Bowl. How many tickets went to average people? They did not. They were selling their tickets to corporate buyers who were paying $6, $7, $8 to $10,000 per ticket. Only 1% of those tickets went to average non-affiliated people. Even the NBA All-Star game was very similar. It's because the business class, the 10%, are those who have the most money, and that is who they're going towards. The issue on a broader scale is because it is such a small class of people, it makes the larger economy a lot more crippled. Should something happen to that smaller class of people, the entire economy can absolutely fall apart. However, that does not help you move forward. So how do we solve that issue for you? Because that is what you're actually here for, and it's why you've already hit that subscribe button. That was your chance to go ahead and hit the subscribe button. The real first part is this is your opportunity to consider teaming up. The last 30 years have absolutely changed, and you're going to have to think differently about how you go throughout your financial life. So what I mean by teaming up is either A, consider, depending on what your age bracket is and what your family situation is, but I've had clients who have done this, I've had friends who have done this, but whatever way you want to consider doing this, I've had people who have lived or moved back with their parents, especially during the pandemic. Even I did this during the pandemic, but have moved back in with parents or in-laws for a specified period of time. Why did they do that? It allowed them to save money because they weren't paying rent. Doing that set them ahead to buy their first house. I did this because of the pandemic. Pandemic shut down, job shut down, wasn't paying daycare, moved in with our in-laws because it was a pandemic. Saved for a year, had that money, bought a house. Ta-da. Now I have had since 2017, I think I've had at least 8 clients that at some point in time moved back in with their parents for one reason or another, whether it's pandemic related, cost related, preference related, moved back in for a period of time, saved money, paid off debt, and then went to go invest or do whatever it is they wanted to do. It is more common than you think, and it is a strategy rather than a crutch. I've also had friends that were like, hey, let's team up, let's be roommates, split costs down the middle, and save more money to accomplish a bigger goal down the line. It may be unconventional for some people, but it is something that can work. A temporary setback, and what some people may see, especially for a guy, it feels like a temporary setback. Like, I didn't want to move back in with my in-laws, or move in with my in-laws. It wasn't back because I wasn't there to begin with. But like, in my mind, I don't want to move back in with my parents. But do I want to save $60,000? Do I want to have $6,000 in cash? Yeah, I do. Right? What can I do with that type of money? Right? So I might have to think a bit differently about those types of things if I want to get to where I'm going, because the economy is much more different than what it was. How else are you going to leap ahead in a market where the average house or the median house is $400,000? Now, if it's $120,000, different story, right? That's a different situation. If you have student debt and that's $60,000 or $70,000, we're gonna have to think of it differently, right? So that's one thing that you might want to consider doing. Number two, you are going to have to invest. That's not optional. That's not optional at all. And I would also argue that anything preventing you or slowing you down from investing is also something that you can't negotiate either. There are so many pieces of advice, some from Dave Ramsey, some from other internet personalities that say, hey, you should stop investing, delay investing, do all these other things, and then you can earn the right to invest later. I don't believe in that BS, especially in this type of economy today. The longer you wait to invest, the harder it is going to be for you to catch up. You can not invest as much and balance the two, but not investing at all, I believe, sets you further back than what you think, and the math backs that up. That's going to hurt you in the long term. You have to own assets in this type of economy if you are going to move anywhere. If for any reason you lose your job, you are going to need those assets, both saving and investing. If you do decide to try and buy a house, you might need those assets in some way. And that doesn't mean 401k, because you don't necessarily want to have to pull from that, but you can, right? Not recommending that at all. I had a brokerage account that I could use freely. I could put in as much money and take out as much money as I chose to, and use a portion of that to buy my house. When I lost my job, I could still use that brokerage account to live off of when I needed it in case my cash ran out. Because I had assets and because I invested, that is what it was for. That was an option that I had because I owned assets. And because the market was up, because I invested wisely, because I subscribed to this channel, it's your second opportunity. If you ain't listened the first time, it's your chance to do it right now. But because I invested wisely, that allowed me the opportunity to do that. But it's only because I had assets. If I didn't have it, it wouldn't have been there. If it weren't there, who knows where my future would have been had I not invested in those assets. So you have to be in the right places. You have to own those assets to take advantage of when the market does rise. That's what's going to feel like, it's not worth saying out loud, but it is. It is important. The reason why that's important is because it allows you to cover yourself should something catastrophic happens. When I say catastrophic, I mean like loss of income, extended loss of income, or anything of that nature. For example, if my expenses were only $1,000 a month, it's not, right? I wish it's not, but if it were, then I could cover an entire year of my expenses with only $12,000. Now my income is $100,000, and I only need $1,000 to cover my entire year. I only need $12,000 a year. That's it. That's all I need to make to cover my entire year. It doesn't cost me much to just save that, call it a year's worth of expenses, and just be done. Right? Now, again, realistically, I'm gonna need a lot more. Right? I got kids. I got a house. That's not realistic in this case. But if I can keep that low, that allows me to hit my savings goal faster. That allows me to hit my retirement goal faster. If I can just bring it down to something that's manageable. How do I do that, right? Maybe I don't need a brand new car, right? My car was bought used, paid off in cash. I want a new car. I don't need a new car with new insurance and all that type of stuff. I got a car that just hit what I need right now, right? It's making sure that you have what you need and spending money on the things that you actually enjoy and calling it a day at just those things and what you actually value, and keeping it right there. Going back to the example of retirement, if I only needed $1,000 or $12,000 per year, that means I could hit my retirement number at just $300,000. And I did that like 5 or 6 years ago. That means I could have hit early retirement way back then. And I could have hit close fire and just, I don't know, worked part-time in a library and been done, right? That could have been it, right? So it's things like that, but just keeping your expenses low and manageable, that can make it a whole lot easier on you. That don't make it easy, right? Because you got to figure out what those expenses are and how to bring them down if you can. When I had daycare, hey, that was not easy. That I could, it was what it was, right? So you got to figure those things out. Maybe it's getting out of student loan debt, so on and so forth, but figure out what those things are and bringing those down to a reasonable level so that you can figure those things out and then decide, what do you need, what don't you need, what can you bring down if you need to bring down anything at all, and then how much do you need to save to get there. Those are the things you're absolutely going to have to do to consider, because if you can keep those maintenance and expenses in control, that's going to give you more money to invest. And if you have more money to invest, you're going to start to build momentum, and that momentum is going to start to build true wealth. And that is going to push you forward in that asset category. And that is the real difference between feeling like you're stuck and feeling like you're actually moving. When you are moving, that is when you feel like you have real choices. Because what I've noticed, though, in my life and life of my clients, is when you're not moving, you feel like, hey, the economy is moving me. The economy is moving me, right? Something happens and I just got to go where I can afford. I got to go based on what happens in the news, based on whatever's fed to me, versus this is what I got and I decide where I want to go because I got the choices here. And that's how it should be. But the only way you can do that is by having the right level of expenses on what you can afford, having a gap, meaning you have money to invest, and investing correctly over time and allowing that compounding interest to grow. But to do that, you got to know exactly what to invest in. If you want to know what to invest in and how, you want to check out these videos right here.